Hello and welcome to Politically Incorrect Knitters. My name is Pinkava, joined as always by the lovely Deplorable Knitter. And today we have an extra special guest who you've heard a lot about. It's Cody Schlegel, the author of Odyssey Tale, and we're going to talk about his book. Before we get started, I want to talk about our sponsor, Chicken Lady Fiber Arts. You can use our promo code PIKDProgram20 for 20% off your order, and you can get beautiful yarns such as these. They're so lovely. But yes, go check out her shop. She has some mystery grab bags coming. She has new yarn colorways that she has on her newsletter, which you can sign up for on her website, chickenladyfiberarts.com.
And Anne has this week's giveaway too, which is a copy of Odyssey Tale by Cody and some blue sky fibers, which coordinate perfectly with the book. I'm still jealous. Somebody's going to get this.
They do. They're very lovely. Knit and think about the book at the same time. Perfect.
Exactly. And you can enter to win on episode 95 on YouTube and Rumble, or you can comment on Anne's post on Instagram.
Right.
Okay. All that stuff is done. So Cody, hi. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for allowing me to be a sponsor on your show. It's been actually great. You guys have a very loyal audience. One thing that I found kind of fascinating about it too was that they tend to be checking it out in all different formats: hardback, paperback, ebook, even on Spotify. So, but yeah, everybody seems to be at least giving it a shot. Hopefully everybody's enjoying it as well, but I really appreciate you guys giving me a shot and everybody in your audience giving me a shot as well.
Well, Anne and I have enjoyed it. I know that Anne still hasn't finished it, but we won't tell. But one of our giveaway winners was telling me how much she enjoyed having it, and that it was kind of nice at the end of the night to have this book that, she could kind of get lost in. But you've written 2 books, and I was telling Anne, because I wasn't sure if I was going to make it today, I was saying I want to know how he went from writing like the gritty crime drama to writing Odyssey Tale, and how did that, like, why did you decide to? Is it just because those were the stories you had, or how exactly does that work?
A little bit, yeah. At the time, that's just the order that I happen to go in. I would like to cover one of every genre before I'm done. I'm not sure how many books I'll end up writing total, but I do want to cruise through all different genres. But yeah, those just happen to be the first 2. And I'm actually going to go. Have you finished Junction yet?
No, I have not.
All right. Well, Junction, I'll tell you now, Junction is going to have a sequel. And that's next on the slate. So that's going to be next. And then I'll be going back to the Odyssey Tale world and doing a prequel for that one. And then I'll be moving away from those universes and going forward. But I'm glad that the lady that won that giveaway said that, because that's actually something that one of the editors had told me that was pretty meaningful at the time, because COVID was kind of at its height. And this book really didn't have anything to do with COVID. I was already in the process long before COVID really started or had an impact on the country. And at the end of the process, the editor kind of said, on a personal note, it was really nice to escape and get away from the real world as I was editing this. So that was really meaningful, and I'm glad that you're the winner of that giveaway said kind of the same thing.
Yeah, that's really cool. So are you a full-time author, or is this your side hustle?
This is somewhat of a side hustle. I do work for the family business. I sort of am a satellite for a small chain of gas stations here in Tennessee. And I just kind of do different things for that. I'll do everything from working regular shifts to fixing stuff to cleaning stuff. And here before long, we're actually going to be expanding on our ice cream business. So quick plug for them: if you're going to be traveling to Gatlinburg or through the Smokies, stop by and stop by Lem's Corner and grab some ice cream or some coffee or some baked items.
Here you go. I was listening to a discussion the other night, and they were talking about writing for TV shows, and they were going on about, these people, they write stuff and they have zero real world experience. What is with that? And you're like, nope, working the day shift, you meet people, you learn things, it's a good job.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely learned a lot, especially working at both different places. We've got a few different stores, and you meet a variety of different people, and it's kind of like anybody who works in like the hair industry or beauty or just any kind of where there's a lot of chatting going on. There tends to be a lot of chatting going on, so you learn a lot about different people and different walks of life. So
Sure.
That's interesting. So you do that, and then you have a family, and how many kids do you have?
just the one right now, little boy. He's 7 months old.
Oh,
Oh wow, I thought he was older than that. So
Oh.
yeah. No, you only need one right now. That's busy stage.
Yeah, he's a little sweetie, but he definitely can be a handful. I don't know how his mom is functioning. I don't know the last time she got a full night's sleep. So she's a trooper, that's for sure.
so what got you into writing?
It was actually just something that I enjoyed doing ever since I was a little kid. It was something I felt like somebody had described it as something you couldn't not do, and that's kind of how it always was for me. I just couldn't not do it, and I'm sure I wrote some stinkers over time. I know I did, in fact, but and maybe people think that Junction and Odyssey Tale are stinkers, but it is. It's just something that was always in me, and always felt the need to tell the stories. And then when you get to a certain point, they demand to be out, like Junction and Odyssey Tale, and it becomes a much bigger thing. So personally,
Yeah.
it felt good to just get them kind of, I guess, off my chest. And I wouldn't say I was there. I'm carrying them, or it's like that. It was just stories that I had that had been building up, different scenes, and just they were all together waiting to come out. So.
But you were talking about how you get a story in you, and it keeps building and building until it comes out. And I know that they're not the same, but when I have a pattern in my head, that's exactly how it is. Like you think about it, and all of a sudden it's like time to put it on paper. And so that's kind of interesting that no matter what you're working with, it that happens across different things like writing, and
You could probably relate to this too on the same level, where once you start actually doing it, you realize, oh, I've got to change this, I've got to change that. It's perfect in your head, but once you actually start doing it, then you can actually fix it.
So yeah, when you start the stories though, you may have something going on in your head, and then once you put it on paper, it just totally changes shape. Like, have you ever like completely rewritten something you were certain was going to happen?
Yeah, absolutely. Even Odyssey Tale is kind of the third version of what it started as. The initial idea that I had, initially it kind of started as a study guide. I was taking Greek mythology, and it sort of started as a way to study and make the story and the characters easier to keep track of and do tests on. And eventually it just turned into what it did. But my first crack at it, I initially tried to make it for kids. I was thinking, third grade and under, and kind of make it this kind of whimsical, magical kids thing. And then the second version ended up being more kind of a preteen kind of audience, and then eventually worked up to the version that is kind of what it is now, where it's kind of more for adults. So you never know how something's going to start. And another thing that I've been told that really rings true is you've got three versions of it. You've got the version that is in your head, you've got the version that you write, and then you've got the version that you end up with. And I'm sure, again, that rings true for certain things that you make and create. And I did have a question too. I wish that I would have known you back before or during when I was writing this, because knitting does kind of come up in the story, and I would have thrown in a little more detail in hindsight, knowing that I would have been on this podcast. So,
well, on your next version, on your prequel, if you need us, we're here. So,
right on.
That's awesome.
I always have to laugh when crafting is brought into things. I think I said last week that I took a trip, and it was to the Ark Museum in Kentucky, and I'm walking around and they have exhibits, and this is a rudimentary loom, and I'm like, oh golly, oh the spinning quality, hang on, how can you spin cotton that fine but then have such thick wool oh man, oh.
They didn't have anyone on continuity there. It was all just whatever they wanted to do.
Well, if they were making a rug, they're okay. But otherwise, I'm like, I don't understand what this fabric is supposed to be.
That's hilarious. So, so were you born and bred in Tennessee? Or are
No,
you?
no. I'm what they call here. I'm a transplant. I grew up in Ohio, and I lived in a few different states. I lived in California. I lived in Michigan, and here in Tennessee is where I ended up. I did spend some more time in Ohio, but absolutely love Tennessee. And I was gonna say probably about a month ago, you had that guest on. We were talking about who's the homeschool teacher in Florida that had just moved there. At that time, my wife and I were planning on moving to Florida from Tennessee, but ultimately we ended up deciding to stay. But that was definitely a podcast that had perked my ears up. But yeah, Ohio, very small town in Ohio, kind of similar to where I'm at now, but just small town, simple living. It was very not much going on where I grew up, but it was a good place to be, a good place to have a family for sure.
Yeah. And when you were in California, did you notice anything different from, were you young when you were in California?
I was I want to say 21, 22 years old around that time, in my early 20s, and it was definitely different. But I had been to California a couple times, and I had been to that area, so I kind of knew the area a little bit. But it wasn't a huge culture shock. The weirdest thing was that people could tell that I wasn't from there, where I lived. That was kind of more of the thing, where you get looks, and all the locals knew that you weren't from that spot. So that was kind of the only thing that was really stood out for me in California. But I didn't spend a lot of time there before I ended up moving back to the Midwest.
Yeah. I can't imagine going to some places like, and as great and free of a state as Florida is, I don't think I could do the weather. I'm used to New York. We have all of the seasons. Sometimes they're shorter than you want them to be, but you've still got the different seasons and things in Tennessee, right? They're not nearly as pronounced, but
yeah, it is. We have kind of 2.5 seasons almost. Like we have a pretty humid and hot summer. It's probably not as nasty as what Florida is, like you had mentioned. And that was actually one of the things that everybody that was trying to keep me to stay here, it was like, you don't want to go deal with Florida summers. You do not. And we do have winters here, and it snows.
They have mosquitoes already. I mean, who wants that?
Right? Yeah, that was another concern for my wife too. They love her. She gets bit up bad, so she was not wanting any mosquitoes. But we've got beautiful seasons here. Our spring tends to happen a little earlier. I think New York and Ohio are probably comparable in terms of their weather.
Yeah, generally.
And I know that like there are times we go back and forth between Ohio and Tennessee, and it's still gray and brown in Ohio when we come back down, and it's all green and blue here in Tennessee. So
we're today is gray. I live near a lake, and I just watched a storm blow across it, like the whole sky, like you can just see it getting blacker and blacker. But yeah, we're in the gray season right now. That's accurate.
Now I'm kind of curious because down here in where I'm at in Tennessee, like the COVID restrictions really didn't have much of an impact down here at where I'm at all. And I kind of want to know a little bit more about what it was like where you were, DK.
Well, it stunk. I mean, there are a lot of things that we just stopped doing. There's we do co-op, and I'm lucky that I found a co-op that's freedom loving. And so there's no vaccine requirements, there's no mask requirements, even when the state was masking. So we lucked out there, but it got to the point where like I stopped taking my kids grocery shopping and stuff because I don't want them to have to wear masks. I don't want them to be worried about all the stuff. It's now there's no restrictions currently, but you know that they're going to change that probably sooner than later. And dude, everybody here is sick, like bad. I don't know if it's like that all around the country, but there is some sort of respiratory virus going around that is not COVID that everybody has had lately. It's crazy. And I don't know if that's just because we finally all stopped masking, and so now everybody's just passing it around because our immune systems are screwed up or what. But do you guys have that? Have either of you had that?
No.
Not specifically that I know of.
I will say this, in November of 2019, the town that one of our stations is in, the whole school system for one of the districts got wiped out because of the quote unquote flu. And this was months before anybody was talking about COVID. So I think COVID was definitely here before anybody knew what it was or what it was called. And because that it was kind of a weird, it was just nobody had ever heard of it before. It hadn't happened the way that it did. And it was just like, oh yeah, they all got the flu, whatever.
Yeah, I remember there were several districts that happened to, and not just in Tennessee, because I remember hearing about that. And I think I have a friend in North Carolina who's a teacher, and she was like, oh yeah, no, our entire, like, we had to shut down school for a day or two because just everybody was sick, and it's crazy. But
now, where you're at, you'd mentioned the masks. Like when you went out in public, did you see anybody not wearing them, fighting back at all with that kind of thing? Or yeah, all right, okay.
I was one of the ones not wearing them. So the first time around I did it, but then they took the restriction away, and then we kept, as we learned more, and you know, you see the things that are happening, I was like, I'm not doing it the second time. And I got asked to leave a couple places, but and they're talking about doing it again. And I mean, there are still people in this area that are masking. I went to an event at the library this week with my kids, and like 2 families were all masked up, and you know, that's their prerogative. But I wonder if the more they do it, how many people are going to keep complying. You know what I mean? Like as the boosters come out and everything, and how many boosters are they going to be able to convince people to get? Like, I'm curious how that's going to go.
Right? How far does the science go? That's usually the excuse. That's what you hear. It's got to follow the science, and I know you've talked about it on here before. The science is always changing. So how do you pin it? You know, how can you pin it?
Well, yeah, my husband likes to call himself a scientist. That's what he majored in, and he's like, the thing about science is you're supposed to keep questioning it. Like, you're not supposed to just be like, this is what it is. Because if that was the case, you know, the earth would be flat and the sun would circle around us. And like, that's not how science works. People need to get over it. So are you currently working on another book right now? Are you working on the Junction sequel, or?
Yeah. Right now I'm at the very beginning stages. I kind of have it all laid out where I know how it's going to go. There's no mystery for me on what the story is going to be and how it's going to end and who's who and the new characters and whatnot. But as far as the outline goes, I still have a little ways to go. But once the outline's down, it'll be time to go. And I did also I kind of started this already, and I do have a few chapters down, but I'm not sure if they'll survive in their current state or not. So we'll see how that goes.
That's interesting. So when did Odyssey Tale come out? I should know this, but I don't.
Odyssey Tale was released Halloween day of 2020.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And then
so then you took a break after that from writing for a little bit?
Yep, I didn't do any writing. Most of my focus was on the stores down here, and I just kind of set it off, and I did some advertising here and there, and about a year or so later, the audiobook was finally released, and that's when I started to kind of revamp the ad campaign and try to get it a little bit more out there. And it was not initially, like when I wrote it, I never had any intention of it being politicized or woke, and it's not a political book. There's nothing political about the book whatsoever, but there came a point in time where you could tell people were craving some non-woke entertainment, and I'm like, here you go. So that's kind
of something I wanted to ask you about, because you know that is sort of part of our pitch for your book, is that, hey, it's nothing woke, it's not here to preach to you, it's just a story. And so that's something that's clearly very important to you as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something weird happened with entertainment where it felt like you were getting people's Facebook and Twitter rants through characters, and it just there was just something just cringy about it, and they sort of hijacked certain things and made them their own with this woke entertainment. And like I said, I'm not trying to be non-woke or political, but this is just a book or I guess I'm not trying to be, over the top unwoke. I'm just saying this is a book that's not woke.
Right. It's just about the story and the characters.
I'm just trying to say this: if you're tired of the woke, this is a story for you.
Yeah, and it's I mean, you watch our show, so you know, and I do the spiels all the time where I'll be like 3/4 of the way through a book and then they'll throw something in where had I known up front that was in there, I would have never read it. And I'm like,
Mhm.
now do I finish it? Well, yes, I have to finish it because I'm 3/4 of the way through, but now I'm mad. Like,
Well,
that's so frustrating.
I find it so often. And okay, so I love sci-fi television, and so much sci-fi television now has just crashed. Doctor Who has had issues, Star Trek has issues, all of these, very big classic shows. And part of it, it seems, is that it's like, okay, they used to have a story and it was enough ambiguous, there was enough of an allegory in it that you could just empathize with the characters. And if there was some sort of moral conundrum in the story, you could kind of make your own decisions. If this person did the right thing or if this person did the right thing, that you could think about it yourself. You didn't need to give a speech and this is the right thing. And there's no other thought that you can have about the issue. That used to be a part of the great part of these stories, was that you could have those debates and you could talk about, well, what if they did this or what if they did that? And it's kind of like woke world. They can't do allegory. They can't think about things with different layers. And it's like they only get the virtue points if they say it straight up. And saying it straight up makes for an incredibly boring story. And like you said, it's like someone's Twitter post or someone's Facebook posts when they're just say issue, 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 and not, well, why don't you show me instead of telling me? Like, if you were going to write a story and you have this belief system, shouldn't that just play out and not, be so on the nose all the time?
Yeah, you nailed it. I don't think anybody could say it better than what you just did. Yeah, that was exactly it. It's yeah, kind of going back to reiterate too, where there's no layers to it. It's either this way or that way. There's no nuance. There's no room for any of that. So yeah, you absolutely crushed that. That's I'm gonna rewatch this over and over again so I can repeat what you said when I'm talking about this again.
Sorry.
That's awesome. But sometimes a political agenda makes sense in a book. If you're writing I don't know, a book about politics, I guess, but like,
well, one of my okay, so again, favorite tropes. It's like in sci-fi, you always have the Nazis are the villains. Space Nazis. Oh no, not again. They happen all the time. Or like French Revolution villains are one of my favorite subgenres of like in The Dark Knight Rises, that was a very French Revolution themed, how they were going to overtake the city. And a lot of people don't like Dark Knight Rises. I'm like, you mean that Batman is going to punch in the face of some Jacobites? I am for this. This is a good time. But that is political. But it's like when that movie came out, some people said that, oh, well, this is Occupy Wall Street, or this is this, or you could say it's Antifa now. But that's the thing, because they didn't directly attach that to anybody, you can use it anytime it shows up. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't have to, this is not today's issue. It can be tomorrow's issue. And it just works as well with that because it's just a plot point.
Yeah. But in those situations, they're just using like a reference, and that's fine. Like I think people, when you say, I don't want it to be woke, I don't want it to be, you can reference things that are going on in the world. But I was reading Michael Connelly, one of my favorite authors, right? He writes law, procedural drama stuff. And like, he just had a line in one of his books about how much he hated Trump. Did nothing to the story, did nothing to the, like, why? Why do you have to do that? Can't we just enjoy the fact that he's the guy who wrote The Lincoln Lawyer. He's got some really good characters that a lot of people know. Like, can't we just enjoy it? No, you have to put in the line that actually says, I hate Trump. Like, it didn't bring anything to it. And
kind of keeps you out of the story.
Yeah.
That
stuff kills me.
It's weird, and what's even weirder is that they think they're being so bold with this kind of stuff. Like, oh, I'm taking this bold stand here. Like, look at me. Like, yeah, you and everybody else in your little community.
In your echo chamber.
Like, so, yeah, it's just odd. It's just weird. Yeah, the echo chamber, exactly.
So you said you've been writing forever, but when you decided to publish, how does that go? Did you have to like go bring your stuff to somebody? Did you get rejected? How How, I have no idea. I self-publish my patterns, so I just
Okay,
put
yeah,
them out
no,
there.
it's indie. It's a self-published book, but it started kind of. I started kind of screenwriting. I had some stuff get looked at, unproduced. I had a few projects win a few awards, again unproduced. And then a friend of mine had suggested maybe transferring some of these screen ideas to books, and that's kind of how it all started. And there's some good outlets to get your book out there for sure. And that's kind of how I went about it, was the indie route, and just self promotion, and try to figure out who your audience is, and really let them know what you got and how their life is going to be better when they read your book.
That's awesome. I'm pretty sure that when you wrote that, you never thought that your audience would be knitting podcast.
No, and like I said before, I wish I had, because I would have asked for some things that only the knitting community would know about when one of the characters in the story is working on her shroud. There would have been a nice detail in there, and purposely when she does that sort of thing, or when she does that in the story, it's kind of vague. There's not a lot of details about what she's up to or what she's doing. She's either knitting or unknitting, and I wish I would have put a little more detail in there now, knowing that now that I'd be on here talking with you two.
Okay.
That's so funny.
It's okay. We understand. It's not always perfect.
But for those of you who don't know, because I don't think we've ever talked about it, Cody actually found us when Carrie Smith was kind enough to interview me on Deprogrammed, and he happened to see it and decided that what the heck, why not see how knitters feel about his book. So some serendipity there.
Yeah, I listened to a lot of content, and I found Unsafe Space, and they led me to you guys, and you guys have led me to other people. So you never know where different things are going to lead. So I'm grateful that they led me to you guys. I really kind of stopped listening to them right around the time I started listening to you two. So
Well,
not that one's related to the other, but that's just kind of how it went.
Not to distract back from writing, but you said that you run a series of gas stations, and how has that been? I mean, it's essential business, but how has that been through COVID, and now we have rising inflation and gas prices? That has to be its own set of challenges.
Yeah, initially it didn't have a huge impact on us, because we stayed open for the gas, and we did really stay open for all the other services too. We offer sandwiches and different food and coffee drinks, and we never really slowed down. In fact, we never even masked up. At no point in time did the staff ever mask up. Never heard of anybody getting sick. Nobody ever got COVID from any of our stuff. If the staff did get COVID, which I don't think happened that I can remember, and if anybody did get sick, they weren't ever sick at work. They obviously called in. But we never had any issues. And yeah, the only times we had an issue was with masks, is when people would harass us for not wearing them. So that's about it. And that happened rarely. That was some out of towner passing through. So as far as
New Yorkers.
right, as far as food goes and different things like that, the rising cost has definitely had a major impact. And I'm sure you're noticing it where you are. Portions are getting smaller, things are getting more expensive, quality of things are going way down, and we're noticing that big time. It's particularly with some of our coffee drinks, it's hard to keep up with the rising prices of milk and different things like that. So yeah, it's had a major impact on everything we serve. So as far as that goes, it's definitely had a major impact.
That seems difficult. So Tennessee had mask mandates, right? You guys just chose not to, or were they optional?
Where we were, I think in our county, they were optional. I'm not 100% sure. That would have been something that the owners and managers would have had to discuss. But as far as I remember, I don't think it was really mandated. There were a lot of places they requested you wear them. Walmart initially wanted you to. And I know it was 50-50 right out the gate. Half people kind of did it, half people kind of didn't. And there was maybe a 3-day period here where I'm at, where it was kind of like, okay, this is getting serious. Let's stock up on groceries and get some ammo and some fishing gear, because this might be for real. And then a few days later, it was kind of like, all right, let's get back to life. and everything kind of did get back to life for the most part. And especially where we're at in our county, it was very lax. In Knox County, there was mask mandates. I know that I knew some people that went over to a restaurant and they got to the door and they wouldn't let them in, so they left. They wouldn't mask up. They left and came back. So it did depend on the county, but where I'm at, there was no real change.
That's crazy to me, because, and I assume that everybody is like it is here, and like everything like ground to a halt. You couldn't go anywhere without your mask. You couldn't like, and you're like, oh no, we never wore masks. I'm like, what the heck, man?
Yeah, no.
Well, and
people were not going for it. And it didn't really cause any tension. There were a handful of times, like I said, where a customer would maybe make a comment, but out in public, I didn't see anybody have any kind of skirmish over it.
I've said before that here that there was a little bit of maskiness, but most of the masks that people wear is voluntary. And it has been really wild to see like that there'd be waves, absolutely masked, then not. And then then you see more people masking and then they don't again. And the sort of psychological, like, wow, guys, this is odd. And then, like I said, I was traveling last week and we were briefly in Iowa City, and there was like, not, I would say maybe a quarter of the people on the street were wearing masks. And some businesses had absolutely, you have to wear a mask signs on them. And some of them, had optional, and a lot of them didn't have anything at all. And it was really weird. Like, guys, it's been 2 years now. Are you okay? Like, you need a hug? Like, it's okay. I'm not worried about your germs. Come here. Like, everything's going to be all right.
Yeah, no, like Cody was saying, in the different counties, there's such a difference. And I live in a conservative county, and my dad lives in a county where there's a big city, so it's a lot more liberal. And people, when I go to visit my dad, there's people like outside on the sidewalk with their masks on, and I'm like, what are you scared of? You're literally outside by yourself. And I don't know, man. It's messed up.
I was in Florida not long ago, and there were people that showed up with gloves and masks, touched everything they had, and they got back in their vehicles. And I just don't understand, where does it end? Like,
I don't know. I see people here wearing masks and gloves, and in the beginning they would have the gloves on and then they would touch the thing on the shelf and then they touch their face. And I'm like, but isn't the point of the gloves to not, I don't know.
No, plastic gloves are one of the banes of my existence. I hate them. I understand that there's a place for them, but the place for them is generally surgery. And if you don't want to get paint on your hands, that's where plastic gloves are about.
You know where I like to wear them? Because a lot of people know, but I don't think everybody does. I clean rental houses. I really like to wear gloves when I clean bathrooms because people are gross.
There you go. But I'm sure
when they're
you
not
do not
my
touch your
people.
face after that, though.
No, I try not to touch anything after that. But sorry.
Anyways, yeah, it's really wild too, and the sort of the contradictions, but the contradictions are all okay so long as you jump when they say jump is sort of a thing that's like the logic isn't all of these pieces fit together. The logic is do what they say. So as long as that is, then you're logically consistent. And when the rest of us are sitting there like, yeah, this is not how it works, it's like, but that's the science, but that's the CDC guidance, that's the whatever it is.
Do you guys see that Fauci came out and was saying like, do whatever you want now? Like, that was a clip that I saw. Like, so for 2 years you told us to listen to you, and now you're like, hey, whatever. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I don't know who history's gonna remember this, but I know that I'll never forgive them. I'll never forgive, not, and when I say him, I mean EM, like I'll never forgive them for the whole thing, like whatever powers that be kept this rolling. I'll never forgive any one of them.
Wow.
This had a major ripple effect on a lot of different things, and we had it good where I'm at. Like I said before, I take for granted sometimes how easy it was here and how nice it was here. And I can only imagine how rough it would have been if things weren't easy and nice here. So
Right.
Right,
And
and
there was a scandalous, the big scandal going on in England over Partygate, that Boris Johnson had parties where everyone else was locked down. And someone was sharing a story of a family member of theirs that they could just barely see in the hospital before they died. And, you know, that they'll never forgive Boris Johnson for that. I'm like, I'm sorry. I mean, this is that you were not able to see your family members is horrifying, but it's horrifying that the government made it so you didn't see your family members, more than any hypocrisy on Boris Johnson's part, that, you know, that was allowed to go on. It's just,
right.
and then, you know, mental health problems and down the line from there.
But like Cody's saying, you guys had it pretty good. I have a child that is 6 now. So when everything started, they were 4. And so they don't remember the world before COVID. And they don't remember, like, at one point they would go around saying, keep 6 distance from me. And I'd be like, no, we don't have to do that. But like, what have we done to our kids? And nobody seems to care. Nobody seems to think about the fact that, like, there's so many more speech problems now with kids because they're around these people with masks, or they're being forced to wear masks. And it's not just that they've ruined the you know, they've messed up everything, but they've messed up our kids. And why aren't more parents angry about that? Like, I just don't understand. But anyway.
yeah, no, and like you said with the speech thing, my sister lives up in Ohio, and I hope she doesn't mind me putting her on the spot, but her little boy is going through some speech therapy right now, and his speech therapist wears a mask. I mean, how's he supposed to? I don't understand. I don't understand the logic, and I've never prided myself on being a very smart person, but I feel like I'm a pretty logical person, and I just don't get it. I just don't get it.
Right. Like, my oldest had trouble with the TH sound. They used to say F's instead. And to teach somebody to say that, you need to see what this part of my body is doing, and how can, yeah, it's horrible what they've done to these kids. And now they're scared of everything, and they don't want to touch things, and they don't want to, I don't know. It's awful though. But we haven't gone on a good COVID rant in a while, Anne. Other things
to keep it alive. We're still ticked, and we're here.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to get us going on this rabbit hole, but yeah, it's there's before and after now with COVID. So
there is, and we're not mad that you got us on it. It's just it's interesting because we have had a lot of people from across the country, and so talking to some of them, they're like you, and then there's some that are like have been in places like me, and it's just interesting to see the different. Then I've got Anne, who's always bragging about how nothing ever happened, whatever.
Well, I mean, there was a time where a lot of people were masked though, and we were locked down, not extensively, but there was a time period where all of the local businesses shut down, except for like the gas stations and grocery stores and stuff. So it wasn't a long-term thing. It was more of a citywide thing than it was a wider thing that this city or that town or whatever.
And we did have brief shutdowns, kind of like what you talked about, particularly with the factories, but it wasn't anything long term at all. So, but yeah, it definitely different depending on who you talk to around the country. That's for sure.
You know, and even, I mean, we're still in it and recovering and having all sorts of new problems now. But part of it is, I think we're finally getting to the point where we can look back at it slightly and go, whoa, what an acid trip that was. That all happened? What? Yeah. And then the guy who killed the beagles was in charge of that? Everyone trusted him? What?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're getting a lot of people moving here for that reason too. Like you talked about before, where you were kind of limited. We're getting a lot of people coming in from New York, from California, from Oregon.
Because people saw that it wasn't really about the science. It was about what the people in charge were saying. And I think a lot of people saw that and they weren't cool with it. I mean, we don't want to leave here because our whole family is here. Our whole family is in New York, within an hour of where we live, pretty much. So we don't want to leave. But my husband and I have had long conversations about, like, if things keep going this way, or if, you know, we're going to have to do something.
Might have to pack up the old wagon trail and go.
I've teased Anne. I'm like, so how many extra rooms do you have in your house? There's 4 of us. We got a couple of cats. Can we come? Like, but it's no, the whole thing's crazy.
At least you and your husband are on a pretty united front about it from the sounds of things, right? Because I can only imagine how difficult that would have been. Like early on, I can only imagine if you had a divided household on what you believe as far as this whole thing. Because initially it was sort of a, you know, I kind of treated it as an I don't know yet. I'm gonna wait to see. Right now, I'm not that, you know. It just kind of, I let it play out, and then eventually it was like, okay, I see what's going on here. I understand what's going on. But yeah, I'm grateful that my wife and I were pretty eye to eye. At least you and your husband are pretty on a united front. So at least you have that to take away from it for sure.
Yeah, it's true. And the last couple of years have made me see, like, what a big deal that is to be on the same page as your spouse, because I have, like, friends that maybe don't see eye to eye politically or on this kind of thing. And that, I don't know how those relationships last. I don't know how they can, because we've gotten past the point of, like, oh, you know, you think this and I think that, and that's okay. And now we've gone from, like, being pro-choice to the people are now, like, pro-abortion. And, like, there's a big difference between, like, the ideologies. It's not the same, like, oh, well, I'm over here and you're here. It's like this huge gap now. And I don't know how relationships can last through that kind of thing. It's kind of, I don't know.
Yeah.
If anybody's got a spouse out there who doesn't agree with them, I'd love to hear how that goes.
We do live in a weird time too, where every single thing is politicized. Things that I don't think are political, things that never used to be political, are now political. And everything, there's a political line through about everything in life now. So yeah.
No, that's true.
Well, let's talk about something happy. I've dragged this thing down.
I know that it's like, well, that stinks. Anyways,
ever since I had to grab my charger, I have dragged this thing off the rails. So let's talk about something happy now.
That's so funny, because usually I'm the one on the thing going, well, now I'm pissed off and I don't want to end on that note. So
well, I think part of the happy thing too, and this is part of a different conversation that I had, and with also bringing in the COVID thing, that you never ever know who's going to stick to their guns and who isn't, but you also never know who is going to see this and wake up for real and turn themselves around, be like, hey, wait, this is too far now. That you never really know who your allies are, and who they are do surprise you. That the people who are like, yeah, I used to be, you know, a liberal, or I used to be this and that, and I thought everything was okay, and I saw this and I was shocked, and now we're turning around, we're going to get things on the right track too. And I think also that there's, so, you know, media and everything else, that you have the mainstream outlets and they're saying this way, this way, this way, and there's so many times where, like, you'll run into people and you're like, no, wait, there's normal, sensible people out there, and they also see that all of this is crap. So it's not, you know, we're not alone in this.
Yeah. But they've got us trained in such a way that makes you afraid to speak out, because they make you think you'll be the odd man out. And it's like, I'm not crazy. I'm not, there are sane people out there that, and they've got us to the point where we are, we're good. They're good at making us self-censor, stir a both at the thought that we might offend somebody else in the room. And of course there's certain places where, you know, politics are appropriate and they're not, but they've got us self-censored.
They do. And
I said whoever they is, the mainstream media, or you know,
those in power. And you know, there is a good thing that came out of COVID. I think a lot of people have seen the corruptness that is in the government. Like, yeah, Trump talked about it, but I think that the way that it's been handled over these years has really shown people what is going on. And I know a lot of people now who used to be liberal or left leaning who are now like so far right that it's kind of like
Sometimes it's almost like, calm down a little, buddy. We're okay. Like, you don't need to.
like, I'm all about conspiracy theories, but I'm not sure about that one. So
Yeah, numbers seem to be a big one that pop up a lot in the conspiracies nowadays. Yeah, some weird things with numbers, but yeah, they do. They take it off the rails sometimes.
but you know, at least people are seeing the truth, I guess is my point. Like, yeah, you might have gone a little extra far, but that's okay.
Well, there's
an overcorrection.
yeah, there's no zealotry like a new convert. It's like, okay, all right, we're good.
That's a good point, Anne. That's so funny.
Thank you both for having me on. It's been a pleasure. I thank you both also for allowing me to be presented on the show weekly or every other week. And definitely a huge thank you to your audience. And you should know that you have a very loyal audience because you could tell that since I've been advertising with you two that they were willing to give it a shot. So I hope everybody's enjoying it so far. And if anybody reads Junction, definitely know that it's a different read, and hopefully you enjoy that too. And hopefully you enjoy anything else I put out going forward. So thanks again to everybody, that your listeners and you both.
Yeah, and where can people find you, Cody?
Oh yes, of course. The books are available at odysseytale.com. That's where you can find Odyssey Tale, and then Junction you can find at junctionbook.com. I'm not on any social media platform with the exception of LinkedIn. But my books are both available at those sites, and those links will take you directly to the Amazon site, odysseytale.com and the junctionbook.com. They'll take you directly to the Amazon page.
Sure.
Awesome.
And it's also on Spotify too. For anybody who's got Spotify, just search for Odyssey Tale by Cody Schlegel, and anybody who's a Spotify subscriber can listen to it for free.
Wow, that's awesome. Very cool. And guys, don't forget that we're giving away a copy of Odyssey Tale along with a bundle of blue sky fibers that is very pretty and oceany. And that giveaway closes on the 20th. So make sure you get your comments in before then. Like, comment, and subscribe. Follow us on YouTube and Rumble and Instagram. And thanks for joining us today. All right, guys, we'll see you next week.